Welcome back. A malfunctioning electric space heater caused one of the deadliest fires the city has seen in over 3 decades, taking the lives of 17 people. Following the devastating Bronx East 181st Street fire, Captain Michael Kozo from the FDNY Fire Safety Education Unit joins me to discuss the best course of action when stuck in such a dangerous and life threatening situation. Captain, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So, as we know, a faulty space heater started the fire, and it's unfortunately very common. What should people look for when dealing with these types of heating units?
So, when you're using a space heater, you want to make sure that you're inspecting it before you use it to make sure that there's no wires exposed, that there's no frayed wires or anything like that. You also, when you're purchasing one, you want to look for one that is approved by a underwriter's laboratory. You'll see their label, which I'm holding here. You'll see their marking on the space heater itself, and you want to make sure that that has it. That says that the space heater was tested and inspected and is approved to be used. Also, you want to look for one that has an automatic shut-off feature to it. Should the space heater tip over by mistake on its face, it will automatically turn off. You will have to lift it up and then turn it back on again manually. And then just a few safety rules you want to keep in mind. 3 feet around a space heater should be full. A space heater should be plugged directly into the wall outlet. You shouldn't be using extension cords or anything else.
Now, was this a fire that could have been put out by residents if it was caught early?
We don't typically recommend fires. One important fact that people don't really realize is that a fire doubles in size every 30 to 60 seconds. So if you're really not prepared to extinguish a fire properly, the fire is going to grow and it's going to get worse and it's going to really cut down on your time to escape safely. So we really don't recommend that throughout. Maybe gotten behind your walls and you're not really sure about that. So we do recommend that you call 911 as fast as possible.
Okay, well, that's really great to know. I think it's important to understand that these families were just trying to stay warm. Many families use space heaters, and sometimes people are even using their ovens, as well as many other things to stay warm. How dangerous are these methods, and what are some safer alternatives?
So we definitely don't recommend using the oven for heat. We have heard people boiling water to try and get that steam. Again, not a good method of heating. We don't recommend any of that. The use of a space heater is not a problem, provided, again, that the space heater is used properly and that we're following the proper precautions. So once again, a space heater should have 3 feet around it, clear of anything combustible. When you're using a space heater, technically you should be running the space heater in the room that you want to heat while you're still awake. Once you go to sleep, you should be turning off. A space heater is something that heats. So any item that heats or cools draws a tremendous amount of power and needs to be plugged directly into the wall outlet. So you should not be using any extension cords or power strips or anything else.
Now, I really want to know the difference between a gas fire versus electric fire, versus a flame, and how should we distinguish these fires if possible?
So again, I don't think that we're really going to have, or the typical person is going to really have the time to try and distinguish what type of fire they're dealing with. Really, what you need to know is what to do if there is a fire. You need to have a plan of escape. You need to know the type of building that you live in, because the type of building you live in is going to determine how you're going to get out of that building. Yes, if you have an electrical fire versus a fire of, including a couch or something like that, it is going to be a little bit of a different approach in your home. You want to use a fire extinguisher that's compatible to put out all 3 types of fires, whether it be a gasoline fire or an electrical fire, something like that. But keep in mind that even if you do put out a fire that started from electrical, an outlet or something like that, as long as there's still power to that wire or that appliance, that is still going to be live, and there is always that chance of it continuing to spark and start a fire again. So you may put out the flames, but if it's still plugged in, it's still live, and that fire will start again.
So, what is the first thing people should do if they see a fire spreading in their home or their apartment unit?
So the short answer would be to get out, get everybody, get out and call 911. Obviously, it's not always that simple. You need to have a plan of escape. You need to know the type of building you live in because that is going to determine how you're going to escape or whether you escape at all. In a high rise, in a fireproof building of any type, whether it be a low rise or a high rise fireproof building, if the fire is in your apartment, obviously you're going to get out, you're going to call 911. You want to make sure that the door closes behind you. If you live anywhere else in that building and the fire is not in your apartment, it's usually safer to stay inside your apartment rather than try and enter this hallway where you're not sure if the person left the door open. Maybe there's smoke, there may be heat, fire in that hallway or in that staircase. You don't want to expose yourself to any of that. So it's usually safer to stay inside your apartment in a fireproof building. You may want to throw some damp towels underneath the door to prevent any smoke from coming in. But other than that, you're usually safer inside your apartment, as opposed to a non-fireproof building, which whether the fire's in your apartment or in someone else's apartment, you need to get out of that building. Again, if the fire's in your apartment, close the door behind you to make sure that you keep that fire contained within your apartment. But regardless of where you are in that building, a non-fireproof building, you have to get out, which is why you'll see the fire escapes. You always have a secondary means of egress if that fire or smoke is in the hallway or the staircase or anything else.
Now, how can people actually know if they're living in a fireproof building or not?
So it will be labeled in the common area or the lobby of the building, stating whether the building is fireproof or non-fireproof. They also use the words combustible and non-combustible. So just keep that in mind. Non-combustible meaning fireproof and combustible being non-fireproof. You'll either see there will be a little write-up underneath as to what you should do if there is a fire in the building. You can also look on the Department of Buildings website and put in the address, and it will tell you what type of building it is.
Now, you talked about the door a little bit, and I think it's a huge part of why we saw the fire that we did. There's been a lot of concern about the auto shutting door in regards to this fire. Can you explain this and possibly what went wrong that day?
So in these fireproof buildings, the doors have a spring loaded in them, and once you open the door will automatically close behind you. Typically, that is the case, and it is hard to tell. And I believe the fire marshals, are still investigating what exactly happened with the door. I haven't heard any word on that yet. But what can happen is the spring over time may get worn out and just doesn't operate properly, so it will not allow the door to close on its own. There's several things that can go wrong with that door. And again, I really haven't gotten the word from the fire marshals on exactly what happened with the door, so I can't really speak on that.
Mhm. Now, NBC reports that the apartment door should have been closed on its own in accordance with city code and fire safety protocol. From based on what you do know, how do tenants ensure that they're living in a building that follows protocol?
So again, something like that, right? You should know what entails the fire code, what that whole fire code entails. What does it mean to be in a fireproof building? And this all goes back to what I mentioned earlier, which is knowing the type of what that means. What does it mean to live in a fireproof building? Does it mean that my doors are supposed to self-close? Does it mean that that the fire won't spread as long as the door is closed in the apartment where the fire is in? Does it mean that I should stay in my apartment or should I go? These are all things that are based on knowing the type of building you live in. And I think that's exactly where it starts. So the self-closing doors is one part of that fireproof building. And if you notice that your door is not self-closing, then you need to take that to, the board or, whoever's in charge of the maintenance of that building immediately.
A very important detail to note is that these people actually died due to smoke inhalation, and smoke can be just as deadly as fire. What should people do when faced with this obstacle?
So if you're faced with smoke for whatever reason, you need to get down as low as possible. That's usually where the air is going to be a little bit more tenable, where you will be able to breathe a little bit easier. Again, you're probably not going to be able to see. If you do get low before the smoke is disturbed, you may be able to see a little bit. But once the smoke is disturbed by wind or somebody moving through it, the smoke will start to go all over, and it's going to be very, very difficult to see. So what you can do is stay as low as possible, hand on a wall to guide you, because your hand on a wall so that you know exactly where you're going. Once you take your hand off that wall, you could be going in circles and not even know it because you really have no idea where you're going. So if you keep your hand on the wall, you'll start to feel certain things. You'll feel a door, you may feel your couch, and you'll know exactly where you are in your room uh, or in your apartment.
Well, that's a really interesting, tip. So thank you so much for sharing that. Is there any way to make a rescue easier for the FDNY and the victim?
So one of the ways that would make a rescue easier for us is by closing the door behind you when you leave. What happened? What happens is if you leave your door open, the fire and the smoke and the heat spread out of your apartment and start to contaminate the hallway and then the staircase. As we're coming into the building, we're now faced with all of this smoke and gases and heat the second we come in, which is making it a lot more difficult for us to get to where we have to go to make any rescues. So by closing that door behind you, you're keeping all of those gases and heat and fire inside the apartment, which makes it a lot easier for us to get in. We could go right up to the apartment door without facing any of those obstacles.
Now, can you just tell everyone how they can stay educated on fire safety? This was super important, and I'm sure there's so much more to learn.
So you can always go and visit our website at fdnysmart.org. On that website, you can also request presentations from my unit, um, the Fire Safety Education Unit. We go out and do in-person presentations as well, and we will go over what you need to do in a fire and all different types of fire safety tips in regards to residential fires. We'll go over the most common causes of fires and how we can avoid those from happening. And all of the tips and safety information that we share is all available on that website as well.
All right. Captain, thank you so much for joining me. We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.